When you need to focus on building, do you want to get bogged down by your database? MongoDB is an intuitive, flexible document database that lets you get to building. MongoDB's document model is a natural way to represent data so you can focus on what matters. MongoDB Atlas is the best way to use MongoDB. It's a global cloud database service that gives you all of the developer productivity of MongoDB, plus the added simplicity of a fully managed database service. You can get started free with MongoDB Atlas at mongodb.com/atlas. Hi, this is Scott Hansel, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Monica Powell. She's a software engineer, content creator, and community organizer. How are you?
I'm doing well, considering everything that's going on in the world. How are you doing?
That is exactly well. I think we have to say, how are you? I'm okay, considering. All things considered, I'm on a podcast with you, which is pretty darn good.
Yes, I'm glad to be here today.
That's great. So you taught me on the internet how to make a GitHub profile README. You kind of had a viral tweet there for a second and taught everybody how to organize their GitHub profiles. What is this new feature, and how did you teach us?
Yes. So GitHub recently launched a feature where if you create a repository that has the same user or has the same name as your username, that it will actually pull in the README from that repository into your main GitHub profile and display whatever's in that README. A lot of people have been displaying banners or like biographical information and such on there. So when I discovered this feature, I thought it was really cool and decided to share it out to a broader audience by writing an article, just letting people know that this feature existed, showing them how they could do it, as well as sharing some of the cool GitHub READMEs that I had seen out in the wild that of other people who had started adopting it early. And I was surprised that a lot of the tweet and the article ended up getting a lot of traction because a lot of people weren't aware of the feature or didn't necessarily know what types of things should they include in a README so that it can kind of bring in their personality and represent some of their interests, whether they're more professional or more hobby interest.
Yeah, I feel like it's a pretty great feature because I've always felt that the GitHub profile, like for the most part, is all about that stupid green graph that makes you feel really bad that you're not contributing enough, or at least it makes me feel bad. But like people are doing all kinds of creative stuff in there. Basically, you take a README and it's like not quite GitHub pages. I mean, it still looks like a GitHub profile, right? But it's a web page within it. Mm-hmm. It reminds me a little bit of like GeoCities, like the joy and the fun that people have been having messing around with their README and seeing what they can get away with. Reminds me of the creativity that we saw in MySpace and GeoCities back in the day.
Definitely. Like, I feel like when I first saw the feature, I just was like, okay, let me just put some text. And then I saw, other people have these cool images. And then as I like kind of dove deeper into it, and like people are using GIFs or people are integrating with GitHub Actions. So that's been like cool to see because I'm definitely like feeding off of other people's creativity in terms of thinking of ideas. So it definitely reminds me of, I was more like on Neopets in MySpace, but just the ability for users to really control their online presence and what it looks like, and not necessarily having everyone's profile look the same. It's definitely a welcoming change for me.
It feels like organizing and curating your online presence is kind of the developer nerds version of Animal Crossing, where it's just like you're getting your island all nice and perfect, and you're setting up your homepage and setting up your Twitter and setting up your GitHub README to just make everything feel the way you want it to feel, and everyone is expressing themselves differently.
Yes.
I noticed that one of them was really fun. Was Simon Willison made a self-updating README, so they've got like on their blog and what they learned recently and all this kind of stuff. How far can I take this README idea?
It seems like people are able to go like pretty far with it. I know someone, they created a README, I can't think of their name, where you can play chess on it. So they're inviting different developers to contribute like whatever the next chess move is. And there's a leaderboard so you can see who's in the lead. So I think there's definitely like if someone is creative in terms of the idea and knows how to code, especially if you're able to leverage something like GitHub Actions, I definitely feel like there's a lot of potential in terms of what's possible, which it definitely has, I guess, increased my understanding of like what are the limits of Markdown, since I generally think of Markdown as like a pretty basic way to format content in terms of if you wanted to create a website, generally you would have to bring in other technologies besides just Markdown. But there's still a lot that you can do within that constraint, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen people make really kind of over-engineered things. Nate Morris made a what they call supremely over-engineered, where they did like SVGs rendered on the fly to do a Spotify now playing. It's going to be interesting to see how far people can take it, and maybe I could make my GitHub homepage my own, replace my website. It could become my homepage.
Maybe. I feel like for me, I like the way that my GitHub README looks, but I also really like having my own like personal website where I can do whatever I want, and really having like a rich like archive of all of the different things that I've done.
That's a good point. How important do you think it is for a developer these days to have their own space, to not put their things behind a walled garden or someone else's website?
I would say I find it pretty important, especially if you're going to be creating online content. So I've been writing blog posts for a while. And when I first started, I was like using my own website, and then medium.com became more popular within the tech community. So I was doing a lot of blogging on Medium. But within the past few years, a lot of the publications that I was contributing to on Medium have migrated away. A lot of developers are starting to use Dev2 a lot more. So I found like in terms of having continuity, it's been helpful to have like my own personal website and then cross post to other websites like Medium or Dev2, which is good because it can help so that what I am creating is getting more exposure. But I definitely think it's important to have like your own space just where you can like document things. I've seen in other fields, people have recommended like if you are publishing content to make sure you have a PDF of that content. So like if the website goes down and for whatever reason you can't get it from the archive, you have like your own copy of your content. So I definitely feel like it's important from that regard of having your own website. And I've also found, as someone who I decided that I had enough time to really like spend on my website in terms of like designing it, how I wanted it to be designed, and really like exploring like different, I guess, like technologies and stuff, which it definitely took me a while to get to the point where I was able to dedicate the time and the resources to that. But I found that it's given me like a nice creative outlet where I can really do whatever I want, whereas I don't have that, ability during my day job to really do things that like, are kind of off the beaten path or may or may not resonate with people. So I've enjoyed just like having that platform to really explore.
Yeah, I really like running my little website. Like there's the blog part, there's the homepage, there are different apps. Mm-hmm. Now I've got the podcast, that's its own app. I've got a little newsletter. Your website's very similar. You've got work and speaking and newsletter. And I've got like little sites and mini sites. And it seems like just the gentle kind of meter of keeping the website up. I'm sure your website occasionally goes down, or there's a hiccup or a DNS or an SSL certificate to like renew. That the running and maintenance of the website is an education in itself, because a couple times a year there's some new thing I learn about running a website.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. I feel like there are some like things that pop up, like especially in relation to DNS, just having to like quickly on the fly figure out how to resolve an issue. Or I have like sometimes I'll be just casually looking at my site. and notice that there's some type of bug, which is a little interesting because I'm like, oh, this thing has been out for however long, and I probably wouldn't have noticed. But it definitely gives me the opportunity to revisit the implementation and figure out whether or not I think it's worth like handling a certain edge case and how would I handle that edge case. So it definitely has presented itself like learning opportunities for me. When my GitHub article became popular, I actually ran into an issue where I had web mentions on my website. So every time someone likes a tweet that has a link to my article, it rebuilds my website. Which is not ideal if you're paying for like a certain number of build minutes. So I ended up having to update my website. So instead of having all of the webhooks like automatically trigger a new build of my site, having it so that I just will build my website whenever I want in terms of if I make a change, or I could do it on a schedule. The real solution is to have the web mentions fetched on the client side, but I needed to do like a hot fix just so that I wasn't using up too much of my build minutes. I also needed to limit the amount of faces that I showed in the web mentions because all of that uses bandwidth when you're loading up these images. So I definitely had like some learnings like that that made me like revisit some of the decisions that I made about my website.
See, I love stuff like that. I've got those little trade-offs that you only really find out unless you're working, right? Whether it be working on something in your job or on your little side thing. Like, for example, my website, this is a funny thing, is down for an hour every single year when we turn the clocks back. Because because at 2:0 whatever a.m. on when you fall back, I don't handle that well, and my website's down for an hour every single year. And every single year, someone tweets me that they're visiting my blog at 2 a.m. on October, whatever. And I'm like, man, it's been 15 years. I need to fix that bug one of these days. And I know the bug, I know where it is, but it's like, because you have to balance out like what's the important edge case that you want to deal with today. And for that one,
definitely,
it doesn't really bother me that much. It bothers some people though, for an hour every year. So it sounds like you think it's really important, and I think it's really important that people like register their own domains, put stuff up there. It feels though that they don't do that because they don't feel like that has value, or they don't have the time, like it's too much. But it seems like with Jamstack and with static websites, like it's easier than ever to put a website up quickly and cheaply. Would you agree?
Definitely. So until recently for my personal website, I wasn't actually not. I was like within the free tier of Netlify. So everything that I was doing was completely free. I'm kind of like at the edge of it where I think I could maybe still stay on it, but there would definitely need to be like some more optimizations that I would need to do to my website. But I would say between Netlify and GitHub Pages, there definitely are like a lot of low cost or free options to hosting websites now, which is great. And I know I use Gatsby a lot for web development. And so they have a very robust gallery of different starter templates that you can use to create a website. And depending on what your needs are, you might not even really need to modify the template much aside from changing like the actual information that is being rendered. And they also will a lot of times have a button that's like one click and you deploy it to Netlify. So it's really, you click a button, you log into Netlify, so you authenticate with your GitHub account. And then you have a new GitHub repository with the website as well as it's deployed somewhere. So I would say you really could deploy a website in under 5 minutes if you are quick to choose which starter you want and find one that has a button. There's obviously more work that goes into actually like updating the content. And then if you want to have a custom domain, setting up the DNS. But I definitely think the amount of work that is required to get a site up and running has definitely reduced. When I was learning web development, I had to use, I think it's software called CyberDuck, which
CyberDuck.
it's like Yes, an FTP file transfer thing to get
Yeah,
my
yeah.
files from my
It's a
computer.
cloud. It's a cloud storage browser with FTP and S3 and all those kind of things. It's like the FTP for all the things.
Yes. So I found it a little bit, a little bit like just adding extra complexity to getting a website on the internet. When I'm like, okay, it works on my computer. Now, how do I get it up? And I saw someone had posted a video on Twitter where you can you can drag a file, like a folder of your website files directly into the Netlify UI, and then it will deploy it as well. So that definitely is like a step up, in my opinion, from having to use FTP to transfer those the old way.
Hey friends, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Text Control. They're not only the creator of the fully featured document editor library for .NET and Angular apps, but their libraries also have powerful PDF functionality. So you don't have to program PDF documents. You can make MS Word templates and then merge them with data, and that'll let you create pixel-perfect PDF and PDF/A documents. The best part is fillable form elements like text boxes and checkbox fields and drop-down elements, and you can add those easily to your PDFs and make filling out forms really simple for your users. And don't forget, TX Text Control gives developers a complete solution to handle PDF documents in any business process. So check it out. You can try it free. See the live demos at textcontrol.com/demos. It's just that easy. textcontrol.com/demos. So that seems like, other than the buying of the domain and then, of course, setting up your Let's Encrypt certificates to get your SSL handled, is this a comeback of the personal blog? Because we were all doing the Neopets and the MySpace back in the day, and then it was social media, and we were getting in someone else's URL. I don't like Medium. I've been pretty vocal about Medium being evil because you're not owning your words, and to your point, you need to have that backed up. So, do you think that the Jamstack, JavaScript APIs, and markup and static websites being so easy, that this is a comeback for personal websites?
I feel like I've started to see more personal websites. I obviously don't, or personal blogs. I don't really have a statistic as to the adoption within the developer community. But I would say maybe I became more aware of it as I saw people were moving away from Medium. And like I said earlier, some people were migrating to Dev 2. But I definitely feel like there were a lot of people who kind of worked on having more of their own like separate online presence. So I would say I'm hoping that there's a comeback of like the personal site, because I really do enjoy getting a glimpse at other people's personalities based off of either whether it's the design of their website or how they actually communicate on their website. I really enjoy like just getting a better sense of like the breadth of the different I guess like personalities or whatnot within the dev community. And I definitely feel like you don't get that full experience on a website where the way that information is laid out is the same for every user, and there's kind of like this structure that is pushed onto people. So I'm hoping that people are starting to move in the direction of really making sure that they have a place where they can truly own like their content end to end.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you've done work with, it's Egghead.io?
Yes.
And I think Joel Hooks runs that. Is that right?
Yes. Joel, he co-founded Egghead.
Right. And Joel Hooks has written a great blog post that I'll put in the show notes called My Blog is a Digital Garden, Not a Blog. And it seems like you have the same perspective, and you treat it as a playground, right? You don't feel like it's I got a blog today, one more blog, two more blogs this week. It's not like that. It's learning in public.
Yes. I read the article that you're referring to, and I found it very helpful for me in terms of the way that Joel frames it is like your blog. It doesn't have to be this performative thing. Like it can really be about learning in public, sharing notes, maybe sharing things that aren't like fully fleshed out, like long form blog posts, but kind of like the planting the seeds of an idea that you're exploring or a new concept that you learned about. And so I've found it, I guess, refreshing in terms of just a sense of not having to feel like, okay, I have to perfect this blog post and like spend a lot of time editing it before I can ship it. Like there's definitely value, I think, in going through the editing process and spending a lot of time like with your words, but I also think there's value in like putting stuff out there, seeing how people respond. So I have been trying to adopt more of the whole digital garden mindset in terms of how I think about creating content on my website, as well as how I think about arranging the information. So I've explored, this isn't like fully launched, but like I looked into like, okay, what would it look like if I added a Today I Learned section to my website, where I have like these really short, maybe like a paragraph long about something that I learned, a code snippet, just to kind of like put stuff out there, but not something that I would necessarily be like, okay, I need to cross post this to all these different websites and all of that. So I definitely have tried to lean into the like taking the whole digital garden approach of like being comfortable learning in public and sharing things that aren't like 120% like super polished. So yeah, I've enjoyed taking that lens, and I also like think of my website as a playground. So not just in terms of the content, but like I was saying, of adding like a different section, or just like exploring new things. So I feel like yeah, I think it's, for me, it would be stressful if I'm like, okay, I need to like publish something every single week, and it needs to, be like 1,000% edited and at least however many words. So it's definitely been helpful for me to have that lens. A lot of people who have taken, I guess, this digital garden mindset will actually like completely remove themselves from having like chronological blog posts, and really focus more so on curation and figuring out where do you want to guide people who visit. So there's definitely like certain other aspects that I want to like incorporate at some point, that I think is helpful just in order to have more fun with your blog and have more fun with creating content.
Yeah, that idea of like when I started blogging, what is it, like 18 years ago, everything was about the date, and they want the date and the URL. And like some of my blogs are super old, and you should go there and you should see the date and you should be like, oh, I should not read this. This is way too old. But then some of it's not technical. It's just like me talking, and people will tweet about it and they'll be like, old advice from Hanselman, but still good today. And I was like, well, no, man, this is evergreen. Like this is just solid advice. Like the Digital Garden article by Joel has no date. It's just like knowledge, but some how to debug some obscure thing in this version of Linux that kind of deserves a date. You're making me think I need to go and remove the calendar focus from my blog and treat it more like this.
Yeah, I definitely think there's like a balance, like you said, though, of like there is some value in knowing how recent something was written, like if it's very like focused on a certain technology. So I know some people have thought about like, well, is it more meaningful to say like this was written for version whatever of the software versus like the time? Like certain technology moves faster than others. So I definitely think that's still like an outstanding question. But I do think there is still some underappreciation for like evergreen content where it's like people do think like less like of a throwback, even if the information is just as salient as it was when it was first published.
That's I'm really going to think about that, because I'm looking here, like I've got the date as the first thing right after the title. Like it's right in your face. And if you see like, 2011, you'll be like, there's nothing useful that happened in 2011. Like that was a trash year or whatever. And then you're just going to ignore it completely. I'm going to try that as an experiment. I'm going to remove the date temporarily. I'll comment it out and see what people think, and see if they treat my content differently. That's really going to be interesting. Oh, okay. I like that. Now, another thing that you do that I like a lot is that you kind of unapologetically learn in public. A lot of people I talk to I'll say, why don't you blog more? Why don't you do, oh, I've got like 7 blog posts, Scott. They're like 60% done and they're in my drafts. I'm hearing you say, okay, fine, get them to 65% done and then post them anyway.
Yeah, I think the big thing is like really like getting stuff out there. One person who has written a lot about learning in public is Sean Wang, who goes by Swix on Twitter and most platforms. And they've talked about the importance that they found in learning in public and putting yourself out there, and how it can really help accelerate your learning, or give you the opportunity to have discussions with people about what you're learning, which I think is super valuable. I found for me, learning in public definitely probably came from when I was first getting more involved with web development. I was very involved with the Code Newbie community on Twitter. So a lot of their Twitter chats, you want to know like what are people working on, what are the challenges people are facing. So that definitely gave me the opportunity to share like what I'm working on, what I'm learning with a wider audience. And I found like that's just a really good practice to be in, of just kind of like uh, putting yourself out there, seeing what are other people excited about, potentially finding someone who is working on something similar, who can help keep you accountable or share resources. I think has definitely been very crucial to me as a developer, especially as I was transitioning into technology, and really wanting to like soak up as much information as I could.
Do you feel though, as like I'm a little more further along, shall we say, in
Mm-hmm.
my career from a year's perspective? How would you say, if a person's got a year in, 5 years in, 10 years in, what should you do if you're early in career and you're like either embarrassed or nervous about learning in public because you think that people are going to pick on you? While someone like me, if I do something stupid, or not stupid, if I make an obvious mistake, they're not going to like target me.
Yes. So I definitely think I would say like people should try to work on like pushing themselves a little bit outside of their comfort zone, but recognizing like what they are or aren't comfortable with. So I know Dan Abramov, who is a core React contributor. A lot of people just assume that they know a lot. And so they actually wrote a post about all of the things that they don't know, which a lot of people wouldn't be comfortable putting themselves out there. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you should do that. But I found for me, like I enjoy sharing what I know through like written communication. And then something I'm trying to push myself to do more of is more video content, whether that's live on Twitch or pre-recorded and uploaded to Egghead. That's something that I'm trying to push myself in. I found when I was doing Twitch that I felt like I was not only learning like some type of technology in front of other people, but also learning how to use the broadcasting software in front of other people. So for me, that did feel uncomfortable, and it's something that I kind of am trying to like kind of ease myself into a little bit more slowly. So I definitely recommend that people try to figure out what they're comfortable with. I know writing your first or maybe your third blog post can be very scary, but I think just like putting stuff out there, especially if you can post it on a site like Dev2, where you can get engagement even if this is your first blog post, which I think is like pretty cool. You don't have to have an audience already. People will come to read your article if it's something that's related to a topic that they're interested in. So I definitely would suggest that. And I would say aside from that, like trying to find a community where you feel comfortable. So for me, especially when I was first getting started, I would say the Code Newbie community, the founder, Saran, has put a lot of thought and energy into making sure that that community is a supportive community where people can feel welcomed and can learn in public and things of that nature. And I recently join a community called Party Corgi, which I went to their landing page because someone had recommended it, and it said like this is the most supportive community for content creators. And I definitely feel like my experience in that organization or in that community has it has like lined up with what they were pitching it as. So I feel like I personally have gravitated towards communities like that, where everyone kind of has like their goals of how they want to improve themselves, and everyone also wants to see everyone else do well. So I think having those spaces where it's okay for you to say, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm trying something new, and getting feedback if that's what you want, has definitely been like very helpful for me.
That's really good advice. Like I've been doing I've been doing a lot of YouTube lately, and I'm totally just deleting negative comments. And I'm finding that if I pull the weeds out really quickly, those negative comments, that it's curating kind of a friendlier place.
Nice.
And I'm also, like you said, there's a difference between doing something live and doing it a little bit recorded, because if I messed up, I could at least try again. So I feel, even though YouTube has a reputation as being not particularly friendly, that it's been friendly to me because I get to practice ahead of time, record it, edit if I got in trouble, and then just aggressively delete and block trolls. And that's worked out pretty well.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's definitely important to like actively curate if you're running a community, to make sure that when new people come, they kind of get a sense of like what is or isn't acceptable in the community. So I think if you like left up a lot of troll comments, I think that will just attract more trolls. But if that's not as common, then I think it kind of does encourage indirectly better behavior. Although if someone wants to troll, obviously they don't necessarily have the same standards as other people, but I definitely think that goes a long way.
That's really good advice, and I really would like to see more people like have that attitude, because I think a lot of people say, everyone's already done that. They've already done a React 101. I don't want to do that. I'm not an expert, but here I am doing a Git 101. I don't know anything about Git. And I'm sure there's a million much better Git tutorials than the one I'm doing, but I'm kind of more doing it for me. And I think that seems like a good attitude. Like you seem to have that attitude as well. You're not doing all of this content and curating your digital garden for anyone but yourself.
Yes, I definitely feel like it can seem like everything's already been written about, but I know something that's like encouraged within the party corgi community is like, it doesn't matter if someone else has written about this thing. Like you bring your own unique perspective, especially like if you just learned how to do something, you may resonate with someone else who's learning how to do it. So I definitely think there's value, whether it's like documenting something for yourself, as well as like even if other people have written about it, you don't know what people will find value in, what will resonate with people, especially when you're just like starting out creating content. So I definitely would encourage people to write it anyway, even if they're like, oh, okay, this somebody else knows this topic better than me, or whatnot. So I would say that definitely shouldn't deter someone from putting themselves out there.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for putting yourself out there.
Thank you.
Cool. I've been talking with Monica Powell. You can check her out at aboutmonica.com or on Twitter, CodePen, LinkedIn, Twitch, and all over. And of course, her stuff on egghead.io. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.